You've got mail.
Well, here we are live on, we actually came on 2 minutes, almost 2 minutes early. Joe Chaffee and Joe Rayo on the wonderful Joe and Joe Weather Show on this Wednesday, the 24th, a day that shall be remembered in infamy, Joe, because at about 1 o'clock this afternoon, my dew points fell. And it really just turned out to be a beautiful afternoon and evening. Just came back from my second walk of the day, 3 miles.
Yeah, it looks like we got a couple of days that'll be in the 50s dew point wise. So tomorrow and Friday look a-okay. There's a little bit of a chance, I think, late tomorrow or tomorrow evening for maybe a passing shower or storm, but most of you probably will not see one. And looks like the humidity is going to come back full force beginning Saturday, and it's going to really be humid again here Sunday into the early part of next week.
Right, and then we're going to have...
And that's pretty much it, Joe. And
well, we've got a few other things that we can talk about, for God's sake. Still have some questions as to how next week is going to evolve. Of course, Sal Blandino has been basically walking the edge of the cliff over the last 2 days. I told Sal it is not illegal. As far as I know, they have not made it illegal to talk about an onshore flow. That may be coming. We live in strange times. You don't know. Apparently, Sal is part of the anti-onshore flow group thing, so he's all wrapped up over that. In all honesty, this could actually break out quite nicely if we play our cards right, because I was kind of looking at everything today, and even if we do get into this onshore flow next week for a few days, we could wind up being in a situation where the high to the north just basically suppresses everything south, and you've got, like we had last week, where may not necessarily be fun for, say, Virginia and the Carolinas and points west, because they'll be stuck in that frontal boundary. But we may wind up being in a pretty decent spot where we'll have some sunshine and a nice breeze from the northeast and temperatures that'll be reasonable, humidity levels that'll be reasonable. I don't think that I don't necessarily think that just because we may see an onshore flow automatically means that we're going to wind up with low clouds and fog and temperatures in the 60s until further notice.
I think my only concern is the return of the humidity, and that humidity I think is going to be returning big time. A couple of days of nice pleasant conditions. In fact, my wife and I were discussing whether or not we should give the air conditioning a little bit of a rest now over the next couple of days. To her, she still feels a day like today is still kind of warm, but it is going to drop tonight, temperature-wise up here, probably into the upper 50s and low 60s. So that'll be enough, I think, to open the windows a little bit later tonight. And again, next couple of days, not bad. And then I'm going from mid 60s in the dew point category by Saturday, a big jump, upper 60s to maybe even near 70, kind of a day coming up on Sunday.
And I thought maybe there might be the chance with a little trough coming through Saturday evening, and maybe we'll see a line of storms with that. Haven't ruled it out. The NAM was playing it up today a little bit. The GFS kind of has a similar idea, but it's hard to imagine that we're going to go, the next week and a half without seeing any rain. But it has been, we didn't get anything last night here, and certainly didn't get anything this morning while we were sitting in the clouds.
Up here, we had a little bit of a rumble, just a rumble, and maybe a little shower here and there, but yeah, no big deal. Certainly not a drought breaker, that's for sure.
Our buddy Alfred Phillips is on today from the North Slope of Alaska. I just wonder, Alfred, what are weather conditions like up there? Reaver 501. You asked me a question on a video, and you know what? I can't remember what the question was. So if you put it in the chat, I can address it now. Just, You know, Joe, my memory is like Jello. It's really bad. It's gotten really bad. Um, so anyway, Reaver, if you want to go ahead and restate your question, I will address it. We we've got dust to talk about. I think we should spend a little bit of time talking about the Saharan dust because I mean it's all over the place in the tropical. There's actually two areas of Saharan dust. There's one area that's already in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, and it looks like some of the dust, at least from what I saw on the satellite today, kind of pushing up into the central Gulf states. And then there's a little bit of a break in the tropical Atlantic, and then there's a second, what looks like an even larger area of dust that's coming off the African coast, and that's probably going to work its way across. So we're going to have to play all. This is all going to have to play out. Uh, Oddly enough, the Joe, the GFS in its mid-range tries to do something in the Northwest Caribbean and into the Gulf of Mexico. That would be probably after the 4th of July, so we'll take a look at that. And Alfred Phillips' summer season weather up where he is a whopping 36 degrees. But what's
That's
the
lovely.
but what's the dew point? Are your dew points up?
Well, that's one thing that
Is it is
we,
it a
we
humid 36? That's what I would like to know.
hey, listen, I went to Alaska back in 2016 and in July, late July, and to me it was amazing. It was temperatures were in the 60s, and we had a little bit of drizzle from time to time. Nothing like what we were having here. Here we were like in the midst of a heat wave, but it's a whole different world up there. And that wasn't even the north slope of Alaska. That was up in Juneau. Um, I'm not even thinking about what the heck it could have been like if it were in Anchorage for Fairbanks or where Alfred is, all the way up near
Alpha.
Barrow.
Oh yeah. All right. So you know what? Let's take a look at the satellite here. Got to figure this one out. Hold on one second. Goes east. There we go. So I've got the tropical satellite here, and these ghost pictures are just fantastic. These colorized ghost pictures because everything just shows up so beautifully. And here, if you look on these pictures, folks, you look up near the top off the Florida coast. You can clearly see where you see the clouds, you see where skies are clear. There's that really dark blue look to it, reflecting the ocean. And then look further south, and you see this hazy area. Okay, it's very well defined. That's your Saharan dust, and east of the Leeward Islands, up to about halfway out, the darkness kind of disappears. That haze disappears because that first area was moving across the Caribbean, and that is also now you can see that haze, that dust haze up into the Gulf of Mexico. It looks like it's even reached into parts of southern Louisiana. Might be a good idea maybe to take a look at a few obs. And then looking back on the far right, you could also see that next area, Joe, that's coming off the coast of Africa that is moving westward. And of course, you've got a couple of tropical waves there out in the tropical Atlantic that look fairly robust, but the dust is going to get in the way of any kind of development, even if conditions were remotely favorable, which I don't think they are.
Yeah, and dust is one of the things that helps to. And we have a La Nina. We have been addressing the fact that this is probably going to be, if all things pan out, an above normal year in terms of tropical cyclone or tropical activity. So something like this, the Sahara, dust, helping to actually hold things down. And yet, in spite of all that, Joe, here we are, 24th day of June, and we already have had count them, four tropical systems, and that's even more than what we had in the record-breaking year of 2005. So it's only a matter of time to see how things will pan out in the coming days and weeks.
Anthony Orr sent me, while I'm pulling up the satellite of the Gulf of Mexico, Anthony Orr sent me uh, a message today, and I'm going to try and bring it up here on the other screen, which means I might lose us temporarily. But give me a moment here. And I mean, we're off camera now anyway. They got the map up. So everybody's kind of looking, you're looking at the Gulf of Mexico, and you can see that haze layer is now getting mixed up in all the clouds and the showers and storms that are along the Texas coast. Hang on one second, because there are some really interesting stats with regards to what's happened so far. Loading, 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 rawhide. It's taking forever. There we go. Okay, so here, this is thanks to Philip Klasbach at Colorado State University. Dolly has now tracked north of 40 degrees north. This is the first June Atlantic named storm to track north of 40 degrees north since Hurricane Chris in 2012. And Dolly has formed in the North Atlantic the third earliest fourth Atlantic named storm formation on record since 1851.
Third earliest?
The fourth earliest.
The fourth earliest.
I'm sorry, the third earliest fourth storm.
Well, that's what I said, Joe.
I know, my mistake. There's a lot of numbers being thrown at me here. This is the third earliest fourth Atlantic named storm on record since 1851. Danielle was the earliest, and that was on the 20th of June 2016. Debbie, the second earliest by 4 hours and 15 minutes. Okay. Debbie, the second earliest on the 23rd of June 2012, upgraded at 12Z or 8 a.m. Eastern Time. And Dolly in 2020 upgraded to a tropical storm also on the 23rd, but at 12:15 p.m. Eastern Time. So by 4 hours and 15 minutes, it missed out being number 2.
And what year was Debbie again?
Debbie was 2012.
So these are all fairly recent.
Yes.
I mean, now we're talking about like way back when, but yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Well, somebody made a point, and I think I think it's a valid point, and that is, going back, and I don't think you have to really go back that far back, but you have to wonder whether the numbers in the past would have been higher. How many of these small systems that now make criteria and they get upgraded, how many of these small systems fell under the radar and didn't get made tropical storms?
Right.
I think the number is probably, it isn't a small number. I wouldn't say it's a big number, but I don't know that it's necessarily a small number. That's just my little old never be humble opinion.
Yeah.
So anyhow, you can see, folks, a lot of dust there in the Gulf of Mexico. And if we take a look at the upper air, because much of this is going to wind, one of the things that keeps us from getting involved in all of this is if you look at the flow across the eastern part of the United States, you got a fairly robust trough in the eastern part of Lake Huron and into Ontario, Quebec province. And that is going to mean, if you look here during the day tomorrow, for example, this is tomorrow morning, when you look at the flow here, you've got a fairly robust west to northwest flow coming down the middle Mississippi Valley, and then it turns westerly across Alabama and Georgia. So any of that, all that Saharan dust is going to wind up getting deflected to the right. And going forward, that means it goes into the southeastern part of the U.S., maybe gets up into North Carolina, but if I would think for sure South Carolina, Georgia, and into North Florida. But that northwest flow continues through Friday. And even into Saturday, the westerlies are pretty far south. So I don't think we're going to see any of those dust particles make it up our way.
No, it does not look like, and even that computer animation that we were looking at yesterday, keeping us basically just to the north of the main swath of dust. So yeah, it does not look like, at least this go around, that we're going to have to worry about any dust. But as you pointed out also, there's another large area coming off the coast of Africa. So who knows in the days to come where that eventually is going to ultimately end up. And it may end up here as well.
Let me see. I can bring up, let's bring up I'll bring. Let's go to the GFS. I'm going to bring up. I think he's got Africa here on one of the regions. Yes, he does. Northern Africa, and I'll just pull up. We'll just pull up the upper air. And one of the things that's in play right now is the fact that you have this very this whole area here. Okay, this is a big upper high that covers all of northern Africa, going all the way back to Egypt. So that basically covers a good chunk of the Sahara. So the light flow. Then of course you've got this easterly flow that's very light to the south. And the dust that's over this area, because it's not raining. This is all sinking air, and obviously very hot air. You're going to see all of the this mass of dust basically getting pushed out offshore into the Atlantic, and then it gets into the easterlies, and it just gets pushed right along. So until we get that upper high to break, and I'm just kind of looking here going into the long range. Eventually, that upper high either has to break down or probably push further and further north, so that you start to get the strengthening east to west flow that comes out of the south of the Cape Verde Islands, and that's when you get those tropical waves. I'm out to June 7th. I'm sorry, July 7th on the GFS. You start to see a little bit more of an easterly flow. The upper high starts to push further and further north, up almost into the southern Mediterranean. So once it does that, the dust issue will start to lessen a bit. Whether it completely disappears or not remains to be seen. But we still got at least another 10 days or so of this pattern before it starts to break down.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe it'll start snowing again.
Oh, well, we do see it in the wintertime. We've seen it a few times with the snow getting down up into northwestern parts of Africa, in Morocco, and some of the higher elevations. Are you going to sing
Yeah, but
"Oh
not at this
Morocco"?
time. But not at this time of the year.
Oh no, of course not. So with that in mind, we'll come back to this upper air in a little bit, and we'll take a look at where things are going for us in the long range. Meanwhile, in the short range, just looking at current temperatures, Joe, we're low and mid 80s right now. A dew point still in the low 60s with the dew points on the east end of Long Island, but Farmingdale right now has a dew point of 50. Kennedy, a dew point of 50. You've got low and mid 50s dew points across much of New Jersey, all of Pennsylvania, even some 50 dew points down into Maryland and Virginia. I mean, this is really delightful stuff here that
This
has
really
taken
this really
over.
surprised me because I didn't think I thought that during the afternoon today we would see a gradual decline in the dew point temperatures, but by the time we got to midday today, it was already quite noticeable, and it's really amazing just the drop that the dew points have taken just in the last 24 hours. So um, I don't really mind, not seeing it.
I sometimes think the models don't handle the dew point drops very well this time of year.
Right.
I noticed even on the digital forecast, I was looking at some of the digital dew point forecasts back days ago, and they were showing dew points coming down, but they were showing dew points down around 60, low 60s for Thursday and for Friday. And it certainly, I don't think it didn't show anything, any kind of a dew point push down into the 50s like it happened today. So,
Right.
but look, you know what? We don't look a gift horse in the mouth when that happens, because this time of year you're still getting into that stretch now over the next couple of months where these sorts of days with these comfortable dew points are few and far between. There's your cold front on the 21Z map that has moved on through. That front extends from a low in James Bay. It runs down through eastern New Hampshire, now moving through eastern Mass. There was a little line of thunderstorms that moved into southeastern New England earlier this afternoon ahead of this front, but that was about the only spot that I noticed any action. And of course, the front stalls out. Your dry dew points in the 50s made it down into North Carolina, but in South Carolina, you start to get into those dew points in the upper 60s and low 70s, and they covered the Gulf states, down through Florida, and back over into parts of Texas. We'll bring up SPC, see what the SPC folks have to say today, Joe. And they've got a slight risk of severe weather for South Carolina, Georgia, and parts of southern Alabama and a small portion of the Florida Panhandle. We also have a slight risk and a working severe thunderstorm watch in central Kansas. A marginal risk kind of expands out from there. Also, a marginal risk in New Mexico and West Texas. And we've got a marginal risk up in Montana and a few small areas in Idaho. There's actually a working severe thunderstorm watch in northwestern Montana that just went up 13 minutes ago. So a little bit on the busy side. And checking out the next couple of days, we've got a slight risk tomorrow in the northern plains, a marginal risk in the Carolinas. They do have us, by the way, Mr. Rayo, in a general area of thunderstorms tomorrow. Now, whether we see one or not remains to be seen. But I
I
think
don't know. I think we have a small risk late day tomorrow and maybe into tomorrow evening. Hit or miss, wide hit or miss.
and maybe
Uh,
maybe if it happens, it'll be inland. It's due to
yeah,
this, the broad trough that we're kind of on the edge on, and for Friday into Saturday morning, slight risk across the Great Lakes back into Iowa and northern Missouri, marginal risk into western New York and northwestern Pennsylvania. That's through Saturday morning. And I'm just going to check quickly day 4 to 8. Predictability too low, predictability too low, predictability too low, and predictability too low. So
low,
as
low, low.
as we said yesterday, that means we don't know. Stay tuned. We may change our minds tomorrow.
Right.
Okay, so dry conditions in the Northeast, although the 7-day WPC rainfall outlook does have something fairly substantial for parts of upstate New York, from the Catskills and the Poconos in Pennsylvania northward, and for northern New England. So that'll be good news for them because it is bone dry there. Up to a couple of inches of rain possible in the middle and upper Mississippi Valley and into the lower lakes, the southeast, Florida, the Gulf Coast, the northern plains, on up and through parts of Montana, some sizable rains being indicated there. Mostly dry in the southwest, which is not exactly breaking news. And just to check really quick, just get we got these working severe thunderstorm watches up. There's one up in Georgia and into Alabama, Florida Panhandle. We mentioned the one in Kansas and Montana. Heat advisories up for interior, central, and northern California. Other than that, some flash flood watches up for parts of southern Mississippi and southeastern Louisiana. And other than that, that's about it.
Yeah, that's about it. Not much to talk about, really, over the next several days with the Saharan dust kind of suppressing any kind of tropical activity for the moment. We don't have really much to talk about
This
here.
is a time of year where everything kind of just stands still for a while.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting that again, next couple of days, I think we'll have tolerable humidity levels, tolerable dew points, and then we're just going to go right in back into the flow, back into the moderate to high level of humidity and dew points over the upcoming weekend. Getting ready to break a sweat.
All right.
For
Well,
this month.
loaded radar tonight from the Carolinas all the way through Louisiana. You can see there's some pretty big cells rumbling about in some places. If you're watching from those areas, and also down in in southernmost Texas, if you're watching from those areas, just be sure you keep in tune with your local National Weather Service office in case some severe thunderstorm warnings go up. And we've got some scattered activity around the Great Lakes. A little bit of activity in parts of Kansas, so also back through New Mexico, Colorado, and starting to see some action on up in Idaho and into Montana. You know what? This might be a good point. I haven't brought this up for a while. The lightning maps, just to see what kind of lightning strikes we're getting right now. Ooh, very busy, Mr. Rayo. Very busy on the lightning strike map. In over Florida, a lot of action this evening between Daytona Beach and Jacksonville. Some areas there. What beach is that? I got to get close to know. Flagler Beach, Flagler Beach, Flagler Beach. Okay, not Flagler Bleach, Flagler Beach. Somebody needed to like reduce the name of that area, that town by one L. Would have
I
made
think
it.
it's Flagler.
Okay, good. Thank you. Flagler makes it easier. Flagler Beach. Okay, thank you. Also, a lot of lightning strikes being reported north of Jacksonville, in Georgia, east of Macon, in and around Charleston, getting hit with some lightning action there. Across northern Louisiana, seeing some lightning strikes out in the Gulf of Mexico, south of New Orleans and Lafayette. We're seeing some lightning strikes there, and also down Nuevo Laredo. I actually had been to Nuevo Laredo several times, by the way. When
Really?
I lived in Corpus Christi, that was the sort of the day trip to Mexico, and also down between Corpus Christi and Brownsville. And just to give it a little bit of a wider view, let's take a look up in New Mexico with some of those storms. Looks like Denver's getting, or west of Denver, there's some pretty strong thunderstorms there. A lot of lightning strikes being reported, and starting to see lightning strikes up in parts of Montana. So pretty busy on that respect. And let's bring up Tornado HQ, which is a pretty good site to have because they get all the warnings up here. Looks like there have been a few tornado warnings today, Joe, in parts of, let's see, Lafourche Parish, Ascension Parish, East Baton Rouge Parish, Iberville Parish, West Baton Rouge, uh, um, Baldwin, Escambia. Just looking here, a lot of action with tornado warnings today. In the last one was 30 minutes ago in Louisiana. Uh, you're so busy day also coupled there. Baldwin, Escambia, Escambia County, Alabama, Florida, from earlier. So just so some of these storms are getting fairly wound up here. Did get have gotten fairly wound up here, producing some tornadoes or possible tornadoes earlier today. So that's why in those severe thunderstorm watch areas, just you want to make sure you pay attention to what your weather service is saying. So here's the upper air, Mr. Rayo, and this trough in the east is very broad-looking trough. It's going to take a couple of days for it to get through. Finally does over the weekend, and we're still running into this GFS problem where it drops this upper low in New England, and then just kind of instead of what it did yesterday, which did look kind of ridiculous, where it was elongating the upper low all the way down into the southeastern part of the United States. It looks a bit more like the European, but it does linger that upper low off the coast of Maine and Nova Scotia right into Thursday of next week before it finally pulls out. And then we head into the 4th of July weekend. And then trying to show what looks like a fairly strong shortwave coming probably on Sunday with a cold front. This will be on the 5th of July. And beyond that, in the longer range, there's not too much here to write home about. Um, just sort of a basic west to east flow across southern Canada, which would probably mean some cold fronts coming through every 3 or 4 days or so. So, nothing too exciting from that respect.
Yeah, but of course, everybody's already taught. I saw one newscast tonight where the news anchors were asking their on-staff meteorologist or weathercaster about the Fourth of July weekend, and I said, "My goodness, we're not even through this upcoming weekend, the last weekend of June, and already they're talking about what's it going to be like for Independence Day weekend." So it would do in due time. It will come,
Right.
and of course, we always affiliate Fourth of July or the Fourth of July weekend with humid weather and rather warm, if not hot weather, and we just might see that by and of course the thunderstorm too. If your outlook is correct, Joe, the 5th of July will have that.
The GFS, by the way, continues for a number of runs now, showing lower than normal pressures later next week in the Caribbean, and it does again on this run develop some kind of low in the Northwest Caribbean, which it takes into the Gulf of Mexico 4th of July weekend, and then moves it up toward the central Gulf Coast. We'll see if that winds up being the case or not. We know how it does love to do that in the long range, but to be fair, the GFS has hit a couple of home runs lately with these early storms, where the other models have not been as bullish. The GFS was pretty good with Cristobal, showing it days and days and days in advance. It never really let go of it, and it wound up being correct. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, in due time, things will become more will become more in focus, so to speak. Um, and I'm just happy that in a way we're not experiencing the dust that the folks to the south of us are, or the we could use again a little bit of rainfall. I think right now Central Park is for the month of June 2.55 inches um, below normal, or in a deficit of 2.55 inches for June, and well, maybe we'll hit the jackpot and see a renegade localized heavy shower pass on by parts of our area late tomorrow or tomorrow evening.
By the way, here's the upper air. I brought it up for a week from today, so for July 1st. This westerly flow that runs fairly far to the south. You've got this upper high that's east of the Bahamas. You've got an upper high that's back into Mexico. So it creates this big area of weakness in the Gulf of Mexico down into the Caribbean, and that's what the GFS is focusing on. So whenever you have a situation like this, particularly as we get, we're in the tropical storm season clearly, and of course the early part of the season, usually it's the Gulf of Mexico and the Northwest Caribbean that tend to be the producers of tropical storms. Although now that we're getting into late June and early July and into July, the area of development does. Climatological development does start to expand eastward. I should point out, though, it's kind of if you look back at the stats, um, some parts of June actually climatologically are a little bit more active than the first 15 days of July. The first 15 days of July are actually, in many respects, um, a bit more on the quiet side than the month of June can be. So we're going into a bit of a low period, and then it picks up toward the latter part of July, and of course, then it really starts to rev up when we get into August. Really quick, Joe, I just want to run through the surface map uh, for us for the eastern for the U.S. Just to give an idea of where we're going. All this. One of the interesting things about this weather pattern to me this summer has been the fact that these troughs that have been both in the east, but more so in the west, have been rather robust. Uh, we've gotten used to summers where the jet stream retreats pretty far to the north, but the troughs in the east seem to want to keep coming into the east. And we're seeing an example of this again next week. But the western part of the United States, they're getting these really deep troughs coming in off the Pacific, and that doesn't seem to stop until after about day 10, and then suddenly you start to get a little bit of a ridge that builds out in the west. But it's just kind of interesting to me that we keep getting these powerhouses this time of year coming into the northwest, and of course, seeing some troughing in the east. That at least keeps us from getting a 12 or 13-day heat wave. And when you look at the surface here, I guess the only real question again, Joe, to me is Saturday night when this upper trough goes by. Are we going to have maybe a line of storms? The GFS sort of picks it out a little bit. The NAM, to a certain extent, also showing it. And then, of course, next week, after Monday, you start to deal with these higher pressures that are building in eastern Canada. How far south does that build? I don't know. If it builds far enough south, it may not be problematic for us. You can see where the models have this frontal boundary running across the mid-Atlantic states right through here and back over into the middle Mississippi Valley. So along that line, there will be some showers to contend with, but we may wind up being in an okay place if we play our cards right. So just hang in there, Sal. Okay,
Yeah,
don't panic yet. Okay, it may turn out okay. I just want you to know, we support you.
this is
Uh,
It's like the let's take another shot at Sal Blandino.
Correct. Because we can. Oh, we like Sal.
Uh,
Oh, we disappeared, Joe. Hang on a second.
what
Oh,
happened?
there you are. No,
You're right. I
all
never
right.
left.
No, I know
I'm
you did.
here.
You didn't, but I gotta shrink this box up.
We had a whiteout.
There you go.
That's
Let's see what's on the board tonight. So just hang in there.
somebody hit super chat. I'm oh yes, Mr. Briller.
Thank you,
Working
Scott.
working deliveries, COVID supplies, miss you all. I thought that was only on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Well, I guess it's a special night tonight.
Today, oh, okay. I'm sorry. He said he's out. He's out doing COVID deliveries.
That's what he says.
Okay, good for him.
Working
Um,
deliveries, COVID supplies, miss.
awesome. And hang on, I just gotta pick up the chat. Let's see. So,
Izzy D says
oh,
Joe
by the
Ray.
way, I do have a couple of links I want to share with everybody. So just bear with me because if Johnny Quest was asking yesterday about the 100-degree temperatures up in the up in Siberia, and there were a couple of links that I was able that were sent to me. So here we go. You ready?
Just before you ask the question, Izzy D says Joe Ray would love to come and collect some soil samples and see if your lawn needs any more lime. LOL. I do this stuff on the side. I'm not the gardener. My wife is the one who does the gardening and puts down the lime and all the other stuff that goes into the grass or whatever. Right now, I think the grass looks pretty good, except for a few brown spots. But that's why I say we could always use a little bit of moisture, a little bit of shower activity, and hopefully we'll get that in the next 24 hours.
You have a sprinkler system?
Well, we have a hose, Joe.
Okay, I'm just
One of those fancy dance sprinkler systems. You know, that's
I'm just asking. That's all.
I still remember those lovely days when I lived in Throgs Neck.
Right.
My grandfather had the flat hose with the
With the holes in it? I had one of I had one of those.
and my grandma said, "Go outside and run through the hose."
Yeah, exactly. That's how we stayed cool because you couldn't afford a pool.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so question one tonight. What was the lowest temperature ever recorded in Siberia?
In Siberia?
Yes.
Well, I know there was a place in the Yukon, Snag, that got down to something like 88 below zero. I can't possibly see Siberia getting too much colder than that. I'll say, in fact, I'll say 88 degrees below zero Fahrenheit.
Very good. Minus 90.
Okay.
So we'll call that a win because you didn't go over. So for Price is Right rules, that was good. All right, now if you get if you get this, I will be very impressed. Okay.
Right.
Um, what kind of manufactured bus is Ralph Cramden driving?
What kind of manufactured what now? Bus?
What kind of bus? What was the brand of bus that he
Oh,
drove?
good Lord. And you know what? I have a friend who probably would know the answer to this question. Um, I haven't. I could draw you the bus. The bus had those the windows, and they had those little oval things above the bus. Um, and of course, also they had the. I can't. I don't know. R44.
It was a Nova, or also known as an Orion.
Really?
That's
Is
what
that
that's what he says.
the name of the bus was named after either a Nova or an Orion
Mm-hmm.
constellation? That's interesting. I didn't know.
Okay. And now here's another one. The quote submitted for your approval was mentioned how many times on the entire on the entire series of the Twilight Zone?
I don't think he said it once in the entire series. I think for your approval came from a comedy skit or a satirical skit. I don't think Rod Serling ever said for your approval.
Three times.
He did say it three
Three
times.
times.
I don't recall him.
I do recall him saying it. I couldn't tell you what episode those 3 episodes were. Okay, but I do recall him actually. I can almost see him saying "submitted for your approval."
Right.
Um,
But
but I
I
don't
think,
know which 3 episodes they were.
but everybody thinks, for example, in Casablanca, play it again, Sam. Yeah, and he never said
He
that in
never
Casablanca.
said "play it again." No,
Right.
actually, it was Ingrid Bergman who said "play it, Sam." I think she said "play it, Sam," and he pretended like he didn't know what she was talking about.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah. Also, yeah, there's a few lines like that in Hollywood, like Judy, Judy, Judy.
Huh.
I mean, that's another one that got attached to Cary Grant,
Right.
and then there's Peter, Peter, Peter. I'm not sure which actress was responsible for Peter, Peter,
Isn't
Peter.
isn't that Elizabeth Taylor?
I don't know. Um, You know, then of course Betty Davis has a long list of famous lines too. I'd like to kiss you, but I just washed my hair. She said that to Clark Gable. Oh God.
Is it my turn now?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Thriller Jeopardy for Wednesday for Mr. Chiaffi. This should be an easy one for you, Joe. I think everybody knows this, really. Who was the president who had the shortest term of office?
Oh, oh,
Well, maybe I was
wait,
wrong.
hold on. Garfield?
No, James Abraham Garfield was not the one with the shortest term. And he was one of the assassinated presidents.
Right. And then there was
I'll
the
give
president that died that Teddy Roosevelt took office. I
well,
forgot.
this is the
Wasn't
president.
William Howard Taft. I know that.
This was the president who, on inauguration day, in cold rain and wind, gave a very long speech, and he didn't bundle up properly.
Oh, was this
And
back in the 1800s?
yes,
Um, I don't, it wasn't Millard Fillmore.
yeah.
Um, Polk?
No, I'm surprised, Joe. William Henry Harrison.
Harrison. Oh, okay.
Right.
William Henry Harrison.
And then number two, how many presidents have died while in office?
While
This one,
in office. Okay. Um, Before I answer that, I just wanted to say Izzy D hitting super chat tonight. Thank you very much. And Robert
Izzy.
Russo hitting super chat and with the coffee emoji. I agree. Definitely coffee emoji. Um, okay, so how many presidents died in office while in office? So there was Mr. Kennedy, obviously, FDR, the president that died that um, uh, for Teddy Roosevelt, um, Harrison, which you just and Garfield. So I'm going to say five,
Eight.
eight. Who are the
Eight.
other three?
Um, I think Warren G. Harding was one of them that passed away
Well,
while in office.
Harding. Okay, so Harding was president and died in
He was,
was Harding in president in 1900, and then Teddy Roosevelt took his term.
well, I think Harding died in 1923. I
Oh,
think.
For Calvin Coolidge. Yes. Okay, you're right. I'm sorry. I keep going back to Teddy. I should just Google it to see who the darn president was. All right, so that's one that didn't come to mind. Who
Actually,
the other?
I think Garfield died and Coolidge took over. It wasn't
Oh,
for
I forgot Mr. Lincoln. So that's
right,
also Mr. Lincoln.
right.
So we're missing one more. Who's the one that's missing?
I You're asking me. He only gave you the number, Joe. He gave me eight.
All right. So
I
you
mean,
know
together
what? Hang on
we
a
came up
second.
with 7 out of 8. So
Um,
oh, wait a
presidents.
minute, wait a minute, hold on. Double Jeopardy bonus. How many of you can name? Oh, well, the Double Jeopardy bonus had all of them.
Oh, here we go. Yeah. William Henry Harrison, Zachary Taylor, Abe Lincoln, James Garfield, William McKinley was president for Teddy Roosevelt. Thank you. Warren G. Harding, Franklin Roosevelt, and John F. Kennedy. Those were
Right.
the eight.
And question 3 was what 5 presidents were born in New York?
What 5 presidents were born in New York?
right,
In the state of New York?
or in the state of hysteria. I guess
I'm going
New
to say, I mean, Franklin Roosevelt. Um, I'm not sure about Teddy Roosevelt, but I'll just go ahead and say that it was Teddy Roosevelt too. The two Roosevelts.
right,
And there's three more.
right. I'll give you a hint on one of them. One of them is actually one of the name of one of them is actually part of a satirical comic strip about a duck.
About a duck.
Yeah.
You got me.
Well, you ever heard of the comic strip Mallard Fillmore?
Oh, Millard Fillmore. Oh, the great administration of Millard Fillmore. Yes, they've been writing about it in history for forever. And
Right.
I'm being sarcastic. Okay. And who else?
Two more.
We've
One,
gone so long. I've just honestly, we've gone so long with this. I forgot the question. What was the question again?
which five presidents were born in New
In New
York?
York. Okay, so Millard Fillmore, the two Roosevelts. Oh, um,
One of the two remaining has what I would call a three-barreled name.
John
In other words,
Quincy Adams.
no.
What do you mean by a three-barrel name?
Well, three names instead of two. Actually, maybe it is two names, but the second name, the surname has
Well, what about Mr. Trump?
Trump. Trump is one of the five,
Okay.
and the other one is Martin Van Buren.
Ah.
Van does not count, I guess, as a name, right? It's just like Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's a last name.
We wouldn't say I wouldn't say, for example, I'd say Mr. Van Dyke. I wouldn't say Mr. Dyke.
Right. Yes. And you make sure you pronounce the Y. Okay. Just make sure you pronounce the Y.
Mr. Buren. It's Mr. Van Buren. So
Yes, Mr.
yeah.
Van Buren. Okay. You're right, Christinapedia. Googling is not impressive. It's lazy. I agree. But there are times where you have to just sort of, succumb and just give up. But just to be clear, I do full disclosure here. So when I do Google, I will tell you that I'm Googling. I'm not like doing it on the side. Okay. So just so you know that.
That's why in the TV game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, they no longer had phone a friend toward the end of the run of that show
Why? Oh,
because
because they would Google it.
they've just call somebody up and say, Google it, or
You better make sure whoever you're calling is a friend.
right.
You know. Oh, I Googled it. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I guess. What about Ulysses S. Grant? That's a good one, Betsy Luna. Was Ulysses S. Grant from New York? His tomb is here.
Well, I guess not. If the chairman says that it's not. Congrats on your son getting married Friday, Joe R. No, not this Friday, Scott. A week from Friday, July the 3rd. But thank you anyway. That'll be something that we'll all look forward to next week here at the Rea. 150 or 200 guests invited, and thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic, there will only be the very immediate family next a week from Friday. Joe is going to be there.
Yeah. Well,
Joe's going to
I
walk you.
might. I might surprise. Hey, maybe I'll surprise you. I'll bring the computer. We could do the show live.
Yeah, maybe
I'm
maybe
sure
I'll bring my
Mrs.
phone.
I'm
Maybe
sure Mrs. Rea will really appreciate it if I do show up with my little computer at the.
well, maybe I'll do a Facebook Live. As different things are going on.
You certainly could do that. Yes.
Partake to that. Thank you, Christia. Thank you, Kay. I'm going to call her Kay from now on because these names just don't roll off my tongue the way they should. Um, in about a month, I'm going to want. Izzy D says in a month I'm going to want to do another 5020. What does that mean?
A 5020.
Another 5-0-20.
I'm going to want to do another 5-0-20. Those that number grouping looks familiar, and but I don't remember it. I don't know. I don't know what that is.
I don't know either.
Um, all right, so I guess we'll call it a night.
Ryan Ford asks, how come in the summer months the troughs never seem to extend far enough south to pick up a tropical system and bring it up the coast? Actually, we have had cases when that has happened. Actually, the trough itself doesn't bring the tropical system up, but what you sometimes have is a couple of troughs close together, and the system gets locked in kind of a channel. It kind of finds its way up the coast between the two systems, or if you will, you have a trough, and you also have an offshore high pressure system. And once again, the tropical system will find its way coming north ahead of the trough and around the backside
Well,
of the
and
sun.
more often than not, the troughs are too deep that wind up picking them up east of 70 and then turning them up north and northeast out
Right.
into the Atlantic and keeping them out into the coastal waters. So it's a matter of getting the trough to be deep enough and far enough south in the right spot. You need the trough to dig down in the Great Lakes and into the Ohio Valley and create a southerly flow along the East Coast. With the high offshore, as you point out, the upper high offshore, so that it's got that channel way to come up, or the other way would be the way it happened with Sandy, where you had this mammoth cutoff low that dropped down into the Tennessee Valley and wrapped up like an animal, so that you had southeast winds in the upper atmosphere off the East Coast. So the thing just basically, rotated up and around it in a counterclockwise fashion. So that's another way that you could bring it up
And a
up the
couple of
coast.
and a couple of storms. If Ryan wants to look this up, I'm sure he can find it on the internet or anybody who's interested. A couple of storms that did indeed have a situation where we had a trough coming in, and I think a big high off to the east, and so the system couldn't go anywhere, just went up that channel. Bell in 1976, August of 76, and before that, Doria, which was a very potent tropical storm that came again up the eastern seaboard and right across our area back, I think, in August or early September of 1971. So there are times when you do
They
see
are
them.
the exceptions. That's why we don't get them very often up here, because you need everything to be timed out perfectly. The further
Right.
south you go, the less you are relying on the stronger Canadian part of the jet stream to do the dirty work and bring it up the coast. The further south you are, you could work it around the Bermuda Azores high. You could have that high so strong that you wind up with tropical systems that cross the Caribbean and either head up into the Gulf of Mexico or go into Central America. So the odds are longer the further north you go. You got to have things perfect in the upper atmosphere, and 99, well, let's say 95 times out of 100, uh, they are they're going to either take it out to sea or keep it way to the south.
And somebody, I forgot where I saw this, but somebody had taken the maps from the National Hurricane Center, the so-called cone of uncertainty map, and with a Sharpie drew an extension of that into the Northeast, including the tri-state area, and wrote underneath in a caption from the WH Weather Service.
Oh God. Um, Steve Lapointe pointing out, by the way, that Ulysses Grant was born on April 27th, 1822, in Point Pleasant, Ohio.
Point Pleasant. So Ohio is a Point Pleasant.
Yes.
I thought we were the only ones with a Point Pleasant.
Well, New Jersey has a Point Pleasant.
Uh huh. Well, I
Uh,
guess there is one.
actually, it's right in the heart of north central Pennsylvania is a town called Jersey Shore. I passed it on Route 80. I forgot. This is not the first time I passed Jersey Shore, Pennsylvania on Route 80. But yes, you have to go all the way to central Pennsylvania just to go to the Jersey Shore.
Not to be confused with Florida, New York. So
Correct. So
yeah,
there's a whole bunch of stuff like that.
yeah.
All right, everybody, have a good night. For a night where there wasn't a whole lot of weather going on, we stretched this out to 52 minutes. So let's call it a night, and we'll see you tomorrow.
We'll be here.
Good night.
Good Lord